It started the way glitches always do. Small, stupid, easy to explain away. I was lying awake in bed, another night of scrolling through feeds I didn't actually read, when my phone lit up by itself. Black screen. No notifications. Just Siri's little glowing orb pulsing at the bottom. I hadn't touched it. And then calmly, in that same neutral female voice I'd heard 1,000 times before, it said, Rule 1. Keep your windows shut. I laughed out loud, nervously. Siri didn't give rules. She answered questions. Maybe I'd pocket-activated her, maybe some weird automation bug, but there was no command history. Nothing in the logs when I checked. At 3:02 a.m., it happened again. My phone, bright in the dark, Siri's words flat and certain. Rule 2. Do not answer the door if you hear knocking before dawn. The laugh stuck in my throat. It wasn't a suggestion. It wasn't the cheerfully phrased answers I was used to. The tone was low, clipped, urgent, like she knew something I didn't. Sleep was out of the question after that. I queued up every test I could think of. Questions, voice triggers, even a full factory reset the next afternoon. By the time I crawled back under my blanket, I half convinced myself it had been some sleep deprivation hallucination. Then, exactly at 3 a.m. the next night, Siri interrupted my silence again. Rule 3. If the power goes out, remain absolutely silent for 10 minutes. No jokes, no, sorry, I didn't quite catch that. Just those words, wrapped in a certainty that made my skin crawl. That was when it hit me. Siri wasn't glitching. She was warning me. And God help me, the longer I listened, the more the rules started to sound like the only thing standing between me and something waiting in the dark. Most people think of their phones as tools. For me, it was more like a roommate. I work tech support for a mid-sized software company, which means I spend most of my waking hours staring at glowing screens and listening to people rage because they forgot their passwords. By the time I clock out, I don't exactly socialize. My apartment's too small, too quiet, and too far out of town for late-night drinks or unplanned hangouts. Instead, my routine loops like clockwork. Instant meals, message boards, and Siri answering dumb questions out loud just to remind me another voice exists in the room. I'd never thought about it much before the rules started, but Siri had been in my background like wallpaper for years. I use it to set alarms, play podcasts at night, order groceries when I was too tired to care. My iPhone, my Apple Watch chirping hourly to stand, the HomePod hooked to my light system, a little ecosystem all whispering together until I barely realized how dependent I'd become. Living alone made it worse. I didn't have family nearby. My ex had moved states over a year ago. Coworkers were faces in Slack channels, glitching webcams, voices riding tinny microphones. The closest I got to physical conversation some weeks was the cashier at the corner shop muttering, "Have a good night." The silence at home made the devices louder. Siri reading the weather, Siri stumbling through pronunciations, Siri answering questions no one ever asked. My whole apartment was wrapped in a net of smart notifications. Convenience was its own kind of trap. I barely noticed when I stopped flipping my own light switches, stopped remembering which station my favorite radio station broadcasted from. Even basic memory had been outsourced into an endless scroll of search requests. That's why when she spoke those first rules, it reached deeper than a simple glitch. There's a difference between a device answering and a device announcing. Siri had always been reactive, waiting for my command. But on those nights, she was proactive. She didn't wait until I pressed the side button or said the wake phrase. She wanted me to hear, and the way she said each rule didn't align with any Siri inflection I'd heard before. No rising sing-song cadence, no cheerfulness coded to mimic polite customer service. The voice was stripped down, darker, as though someone had taken Siri and pulled the personality sliders into zero. Just tone, just command. The weirdest part? It didn't register in my logs. I'm the sort of person who checks those things for fun. Siri shows a history of every query you make. Yet when I opened the app the next morning, nothing was there. Not a line, not a record that my device had even woken up at 3 a.m. That lack frightened me more than anything, because glitches leave trails. Logs, errors, fragments. This left nothing. But I kept telling myself one thing. Life was still normal. Work, screens, coffee, distance. Nights pacing the apartment and scolding Siri for not even being good at jokes. Normal boredom. Only normal started to evaporate at exactly 3 o'clock every morning. That was when convenience became command. That was when I stopped owning my devices, and they started owning me. The second night should have convinced me it was a coincidence, some sleep-deprived hallucination paired with bad code, but the rules came back, sharper this time. I had just set my phone down on the nightstand and rolled onto my side when the screen lit up unprompted again, the time glowing 3 a.m. on the lock screen. No notifications, no command given, just Siri's presence pulsing, artificial breath in the silence. Then the voice. Rule 2, do not answer the door if you hear knocking before dawn. I stared at the phone, paralyzed, not even breathing. Before I could reach for it, Siri spoke again. Rule 3, if the power goes out, you must remain absolutely silent for 10 minutes, no matter what you hear. It wasn't a request. It wasn't even styled the way Siri normally speaks. No rising intonation, no careful pauses, just blunt delivery. The voice wasn't cheerful. It was sterile, like reading from a checklist long rehearsed and carved into its code. I reached trembling fingers to press the side button, trying to shut it down. The screen went black. The room slipped back into quiet, but sleep never came. At work the next day, I rationalized. Someone hacked the HomePod, maybe. Or maybe my phone was glitching with a beta update, pushing out some bizarre debug script. But if that were true, why didn't the logs show anything? Why did Siri's history insist I hadn't asked a single thing for 2 days? Then came the third night. I didn't even bother pretending I'd sleep this time. I sat propped against my headboard, eyes burning from blue light glow, headphones ready to blast white noise. Anything to drown it out. At exactly 3 a.m., the phone lit up again. Rule 4. If you hear me say your name after 3:10 a.m., do not respond. It will not be me.
My throat closed. The phrasing was different, colder. The words carried knowledge. This wasn't a scrambled weather report or accidental automation. Something was warning me. With shaking hands, I muttered, "Siri, who told you to say that?" Nothing. The wake tone pulsed, but the voice didn't answer. No, here's what I found on the web. No generic fallback. Just silence. When I asked again in the morning, Siri replied brightly, "I'm not sure I understand." Like always. The rules were gone from history, scrubbed as if they'd never existed. But I remembered every syllable. Keep the window shut. Don't answer the door. Stay silent in blackouts. Don't answer if Siri calls after 3:10 a.m. This wasn't a glitch. It was a protocol. And the most disturbing part wasn't just what the rules said, it was the implication wrapped around them, a whisper I couldn't kill no matter how I rationalized. These weren't warnings to keep my software stable, they were survival rules. Something out there was paying attention between 3 and 3:10 a.m., and Siri was the messenger trying to prepare me. Or worse, maybe Siri wasn't protecting me at all. Maybe she was preparing me for something waiting to make contact. By the fourth night, my nerves were wearing thin. I'd memorized each of those rules against my will, like the words had carved grooves into my skull. But I refused to be spooked by lines of code. So the next morning, in broad daylight, I tested it. I held my phone flat in my hand while sipping burnt coffee and asked casually, "Hey Siri, what are your rules?" Her voice chimed brightly. "I don't have any rules, just commands I can follow." I frowned. "Last night, 3 o'clock, you listed rules for me.
Windows shut. Don't answer the door. All of it. Where did that come from? Silence. Then the cheery inflection again. I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that. I snapped. Don't play dumb. I'm not sure I understand. The response chilled me more than if she'd said nothing, because Siri always logs interactions. I scrolled through the My Activity section again. Nothing after midnight. It was as if my phone had slept peacefully while I stumbled through insomnia, imagining whispered survival guides. Except I knew I hadn't imagined it. I could still hear the words, monotone and cold, echoing in the back of my skull. By evening, paranoia had dried my throat. I wandered my apartment, checking locks, tapping on blinds, unplugging the HomePod. I even shut off Hey Siri voice activation entirely. At least I thought I did. When midnight fell, I sat awake again, phone face down on the desk across the room, refusing to touch it. I wasn't going to activate it by mistake. I wanted silence to prove itself. But at exactly 3 a.m., the glow returned. Even with Hey Siri disabled, even with the mic shut down, my phone lit up. Lock screen still black. A faint pulse waited at the bottom. The voice was flatter than ever. Rule 5. If you hear your name spoken by me after 3:10 a.m., do not respond. It will not be me.
The words sliced sickeningly deep. The distinction wasn't subtle or confusing. It was explicit. The voice inside my phone was warning that something else might soon speak in its place. I felt my stomach in my throat, and then, as if to prove its own prophecy, the phone buzzed, screen shrinking slightly into a call interface. Digital text. Siri is speaking. Time on the display, 3:11 a.m. My name, but the way it pronounced my name wasn't Siri's. The voice crawled through the speakers with subtle distortions, dragging each syllable like wet rope across sharp glass. Not machine, not human. I backed into the wall, whispered, Siri, stop. The first voice, the flat one, cut back in immediately, urgent, loud enough to almost distort the speakers. Do not respond. Do not engage. Stay silent. My phone screen went black. I don't know how long I sat barely breathing. It could have been seconds. It could have been the full 10 minutes she listed before. At some point, the screen flashed back awake with the regular Siri logo. Bright, inflection, chipper. Good morning. What can I help you with? I chucked the phone against the couch cushions. Whatever my devices were at night, they weren't mine anymore.
By the 5th night, I was unraveling. Every hour after sunset, I walked my apartment like a warden, locking doors, yanking blinds, checking outlets twice. But I was tired, exhausted in that bone-deep way that makes you careless. So when I left the living room blinds cracked, I didn't notice until it was already too late. 3 a.m. arrived like it had every night. Phone lighting, Siri's flat voice cutting through the dark. Rule 1 reminder, keep your windows shut. I froze. The blinds, half open. The glow from the phone screen spilled faint blue across the glass. Wind whispered against the building. Nothing moved at first. Then something shifted in the street below. At first, I thought it was a tree branch scraping, but then the branch straightened. Too tall, thin, long-limbed, bent into angles no human body could hold. Its head tilted, pale oval, smooth as unbroken porcelain. It was standing in my yard. The phone vibrated violently, Siri's voice repeating now, urgent, staccato. You have violated Rule 1. Prepare accordingly. Do not move. Do not speak. The figure stepped closer, not with footsteps, but with a glide, weightless, carried as if the night itself slid it along. Its body blurred where streetlights should have cut shadows. The lamp near the sidewalk flickered and sputtered until it hissed out completely.
When its head turned up toward my window, every muscle in my body locked. Its face was blank, skin smooth, nothing but stretched pale canvas, until it smiled. A jagged, splitting seam tore from one side of its oval head to the other, the flesh peeling back to reveal teeth that weren't teeth at all, but rows of faint, glowing slits, like vents into some red furnace inside. My name spilled from that mouth. Not shouted, not boomed, just whispered, too clearly, too humanly, in my mother's voice. I nearly answered. Reflex is a dangerous thing. That instinct, open your mouth when someone calls you, burned at the back of my throat. That's when Siri cut sharp across it, louder than it had ever sounded, almost desperate. Do not respond. The figure froze, seam mouth twitching. The lights in my apartment flickered once, twice, before crashing off entirely, the blackout rule. I sat paralyzed in the suffocating dark. My heart thundered so loud I was sure it would count as noise. Something rattled outside my doorframe, faint scratching, then the knock. Slow, solid, patient. Knock, knock, knock. The sound traveled down my hallway like footsteps pressed into wood grain. My phone vibrated hot against my chest, Siri whispering, "Remain silent. 10 minutes. Survive." 10 minutes lasted centuries. The knocking dragged its way from window to door to bedroom closet. At times it doubled, like there were multiple things pacing, waiting, feeling. Then, as quickly as it had begun, stillness returned. The lights buzzed back on overhead. And just like that, the street was empty again. My blind swung slightly, open wider than before, as if mocking me. The phone pulsed alive, Siri's neutral daytime inflection chirping bright. "Good morning, ready to start your day?" But I wasn't fooled anymore. Morning would come, sure, but survival wasn't guaranteed. Not if I broke the rules again.
The following night, fear wasn't distant anymore. It sat with me, heavy, breathing down my neck. I taped the blinds closed with duct tape, piled a chair against the door, unplugged everything except my phone. If this was some hallucination, I was reducing the variables to 0. At 3 a.m. sharp, the phone glowed again. Rule 2 reminder: do not answer the door if you hear knocking before dawn. The words prickled my skin because this was no longer hypothetical. I'd broken Rule 1. I had been seen, and the rules weren't just prevention anymore. They were countdowns. I gripped the phone in both hands, listening. Silence. At 3:06 a.m., the first knock landed. It wasn't loud, just a steady thud on wood, like someone pressing politely. Once, twice, then again, 3 seconds apart. The sound came from my front door, clear as rain. I clenched my jaw. My body screamed, "Look, confirm!" But I sat frozen, muscles locked, mouth dry. The knocking didn't stop. It just changed. From 3 sharp pounds to 5, then 7, rapid, impatient. The sound echoed until it didn't resemble wood knocking anymore. It sounded like something knocking into the frame itself, burrowing in. The phone buzzed hot. Siri's voice, monotone, but faster this time. Do not move. Do not reply. Do not engage. Survive until second silence. The veins in my forehead pulsed. Sweat slid from my hairline. The knocking stopped suddenly, replaced with something worse. A voice. "Hey, it's me."
My knees buckled. It was my voice. Smooth, casual. The same tone I'd use if I was calling a buddy through the door. "You locked me out again. Come on, just open up." The blood drained from my face. The words dragged upward like a warped MP3, jittering, slightly delayed, as though lips didn't sync to sound. My phone hissed like white noise. Siri overlaid against the mimicry with a harsh, brittle command. "Do not answer. That is not you."
The thing at the door growled suddenly, not like an animal, but like machines pressed into the shape of a word. The lights flickered once, and every app notification on my phone went haywire. Icons shifting, names replaced by my own face staring back from each thumbnail. Knock, knock, knock. The mimic voice laughed through the wood. You're already out here. Why not let yourself in? Clawing noise scraped deep across the doorframe. Then came silence. Listening silence. I held my phone tight, muffling even my own breath with my sleeve. Seconds passed. Minutes. I counted in my head, numbers burning like prayers. Then the sirens outside began, distant and faint. City's alarms for dawn. And as quickly as it came, it left. The phone dimmed, the voice shut off, the locks stopped rattling. My apartment looked normal. My notifications had reset. Faces gone. But normal is a lie, because I knew, without doubt, what was outside that door hadn't given up. It had only confirmed what Siri had warned. Something out there wanted me in its rule set, wanted me to disobey just once more, and I was one broken rule closer to the end.
The morning after the knocking incident, I stared at my swollen, sleepless eyes in the bathroom mirror and knew two things. I couldn't keep dismissing this as hallucination, and if I didn't figure out where these rules were coming from, I'd end up answering the door next time just to make it stop. So I did what anyone does when they're losing their mind. I went online. First stop was Apple's official support forums. I typed, "Siri keeps giving me rules at 3 a.m. into the search box." Nothing. No threats. No mentions. I tried variations, phantom Siri activations, spontaneous rules, Siri speaking unprompted. Still nothing. That didn't feel right. Support threads usually showed people whining about everything from screen cracks to distorted speakers. Surely someone else had reported strange midnight commands. So I shifted to Reddit. At first, searches turned up nonsense, creepypasta subreddits, haunted iPhone jokes, people role-playing Siri like a dungeon master. But then I found something buried in r/tech horrors, flagged removed but still visible in cached text. Every night at 3, I get a system message that doesn't appear in the history log. It sounds like survival instructions. Please tell me this is just a prank. The comments weren't there anymore. The entire post was replaced with a blunt gray box. Content removed by moderators. I kept searching. Found fragments. Screenshots half-cropped, URLs auto-deleted as soon as refresh hit. One image chilled me most. A phone lock screen glowing at 3 a.m., Siri bubble pulsing with text overlay. Rule 2. Stay silent when the power fails. Exactly what I'd heard. That's when the paranoia doubled back. If people were posting about it, why wasn't anyone talking openly? Why were whole threads wiped clean, leaving only skeleton traces and cached links? At lunch, I messaged a coworker who used to intern at Apple's development team. "Weird question," I wrote. "Any chance your voice assistant pushes survival rules?" He went dark for an hour before replying, "Don't ask that again. Delete this chat." The words sat in our thread like ice. By the time I tried to screenshot them, they were gone. A system message blinked up. User has deleted conversation. No trace. I closed my laptop and sat in the silence, heart shoving ribs. Either this was a cruel joke, or there were people out there trying very, very hard to scrub the truth before anyone noticed. And the truth was catching me, whether I chased it or not. That night, Siri's glow woke me again, brighter than before. The pulsing ring looked feverish, frantic. The voice, calm but clipped, delivered something new. Rule 6. Do not attempt to trace or record these transmissions. They are aware when you look too closely. My phone screen dimmed immediately, like a parent turning off a nightlight to hide me under blankets. That was when I realized Siri wasn't glitching. It wasn't even AI running on my phone. Someone, or something, was using my device as a mouthpiece, a relay delivering instructions to keep me alive. But every breadcrumb I tried to follow got erased,
Threads deleted, messages gone, rules escalating, and yet the pressure in my skull whispered the most dangerous question of all. If Siri was warning me, what was she warning me from?
The blackout happened on a Wednesday. 3 a.m. struck with surgical precision like it always did, my phone glowing, Siri's pulsing light alive in the dark. I expected another rule, another whispered command. Instead, the whole world died at once. The fridge motor cut mid-hum, the heater clunked into silence. Street lamps blinked, sputtered, then fell dark. My entire block collapsed into a suffocating stillness, heavier than any storm. For half a gasp, I thought maybe it was coincidence, a downed line, until Siri's voice hissed out through the static of my phone speaker, urgent, cold, stripped of friendliness completely. Rule 3 reminder: if the power goes out, remain absolutely silent for 10 minutes. The words sat in the air, weight pressing hard. Then the sound began outside. Not footsteps, not storm. Something dragged slow over the street like wet canvas sliding across concrete. My teeth vibrated with it. A scraping song, dull but rhythmic, circling closer, accompanied by the occasional thump, as if massive limbs leaned against walls for balance. I clutched my phone tight to my chest. Its glow was the only light in the apartment, pinhole bright, throbbing faint like a living heart. Siri's voice whispered again. Stay silent. No movement. They pass quickest if you pretend not to exist. My body wanted to shake, but I held still. My lungs clawed and panted at the still air. I muffled each exhale with the blanket I dragged over myself, gasping against fabric until spots danced in my vision. The scraping grew louder. Something pressed against my window, rattling it gently like a curious child. The glass fogged instantly. Not from inside, from outside. Shapes moved in that fog, branch-like fingers extending and curling. I wanted to run. Every muscle screamed it. But Siri chirped another whisper, louder this time. Remain silent. They are listening.
Then it spoke my name. Not Siri, not my voice. Something else coiled itself through the speaker, grating syllables, coy mimic. My name. Let me in. I bit my tongue so hard my mouth filled with iron, blinked tears until I nearly choked. The apartment door creaked under weight too heavy for hinges. Minutes crawled. The scrape circled, faded, then returned stronger. Each pass felt like measured testing, hunting for weakness. My countdown slipped somewhere between eternity and heartbeat. At one point, something knocked on the pipes below, shaking water through the walls. My upstairs neighbor screamed lightly before jamming it into silence again. The faint moan chopped fast, as if clapped shut by another hand. Siri's orb pulsed faster, pacing my pounding chest. 9 minutes, 10, 11. Finally, the drag receded, fainter and fainter, until silence cocked every seam again. The phone's glow faded with it. Then Siri's chipper, false morning tone cut clean through like static turned sunshine. Good morning. How can I help you? My throat tore open in a hoarse laugh that nearly collapsed me. The absurdity of it. The switch from survival guidance to how's the weather, as though I hadn't just played dead in the dark while something tested my locks. But proof was proof. A whole blackout engineered around 3 a.m. Rules that matched it perfectly. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't buggy code. Something massive and intelligent was close enough that my devices bent themselves to deliver its terms, and I was one blackout closer to breaking completely.
Fear is manageable when it's only your own. It grows unbearable when no one else can see it. I finally told someone. My friend Daniel had been pestering me for weeks to come hang out. He lived across town, but when I texted him fragments of what had been happening, he called me instantly, half laughing. So your iPhone's haunted? Man, you need sleep.
I didn't argue. I just said, stay over. One night. Hear it yourself. So he did. When he walked in, his skepticism filled every corner of my tiny apartment. He joked about burning incense for my possessed Siri, teased me for triple taping the blinds, even put a chair back against the door I'd wedged shut. Dude, if your phone starts chanting cult rules, I'm yeeting it out the window. But he stayed. We shared beers until midnight, exhaustion settling heavier with each hour. Still, I refused to close my eyes. I warned him. At 3 exactly. Watch. He rolled his eyes, but left his phone on the table next to mine, like a skeptic submitting to a seance. We sat in silence leading up to the minute. At 3 a.m. exactly, my phone lit. Daniel froze mid-sip. The screen glowed white, and Siri's voice, drained, flat, sterile, spoke aloud. Rule 7. Tell your guest not to laugh. They've already taken interest.
Daniel barked a nervous laugh. Then he stopped, because the phone immediately pulsed brighter and Siri's voice pressed heavier. Do not laugh. The air thickened instantly. The apartment's lights dimmed, even though no switch had flipped. A groaning sound pressed against my walls. Not outside, not inside, but through them, as if a live wire hummed inside the very frame of the building. Daniel's grin wilted under the pressure. Holy, shut up, I hissed, clamping a hand over his mouth. Sweat ran hot down my back. The phone pulsed again. Silence now. The walls are listening. The sound outside shifted. Footsteps, pacing along my balcony. Too heavy. Too slow. Daniel's eyes blew wide above my hand. His body shook under my grip with laughter cut into terrified silence. We clung to stillness while the scrape moved away, then returned again, pausing like it settled right above us in the rafters. Minutes ticked. My lungs burned. Then it was gone. The light came back, humming gentle. My phone cheerily chimed a calendar reminder, as if the past few minutes had been everyday life. Daniel sagged into the couch, chest heaving. He didn't doubt anymore, not after hearing the rules speak his name. At dawn, he left without finishing his coffee. On the threshold, he looked me dead in the eye and said the most honest words I'd ever hear from him. Don't invite me here again. Proof didn't forge solidarity. It isolated me further. The rules weren't just mine anymore. They could spread, latch onto whoever came too close. My phone pulsed once before shutting down for the day. Obedience has kept you alive. Remember that.
Daniel didn't call me for a week. Not a text, not a like, not a meme. That was how shaken he really was. But fear doesn't always silence people. Sometimes it drives them to look deeper. On the 8th day, he sent me a file. No more excuses, the text said. I recorded it. I opened the attachment with shaking hands. At first it seemed ordinary, just a screen recording. His phone, dark, then pulsing awake at exactly 3 a.m. He shifted in front of the camera. Then Siri's voice, flat, metallic, spoke aloud. Rule 8, do not attempt to capture our communication. They will notice. Daniel muttered a curse. The video froze for a second, then jumped back in time. Screen glitching, timestamp stuttering. Siri's orb kept pulsing with faint light, repeating the same message. Do not attempt. Do not attempt. Do not attempt. But what made my throat ice over was what happened 6 minutes into the file. The audio warped. A distortion crackled through Siri's words until other voices began layering beneath her. Not one, not two, dozens. Murmurs overlapping, too fast for language, climbing over each other like trapped animals, moaning through static, and then within the chaos, 2 of them synced clear. Daniel, stop. It was his name. No accent, no glitch. Perfect.
He must have freaked, because seconds later his camera flipped, showing his own face pale as death, eyes wide, whispering, "Holy shit."
And before the recording cut abruptly, the last thing I heard was faint knocking on his audio. Slow, deliberate, echoing from across his apartment. The file ended. Heart racing, I scrolled down to the file's data. Audio notes sometimes have embedded metadata, time codes, capture logs. This one had more. Written in the notes field in jagged, nonsensical characters that somehow read perfectly in English. Rule 9. Stop spreading this. The text element shouldn't exist. None of the apps I knew could generate that field automatically. It wasn't even editable by normal users. And yet, there it was, as if typed from inside the file. I slammed my phone down like it burned. Daniel never messaged again. His account vanished. His username no longer existed. Our entire thread gone. That night, Siri pulsed awake at 3. The voice was colder than ever. He did not obey. This is your only warning. Survive by silence. I curled on the floor, gripping my knees to my chest, barely able to keep hold of air. Proof wasn't reassurance anymore. It wasn't the weapon I wanted. Proof was bait, and whoever reached for it didn't come back.
The rules didn't stop. They multiplied. Nights used to bring 1, maybe 2 at most. By the second week, Siri listed 3, 4, sometimes 5 new ones in that dead, monotone voice, each worse than the last. Rule 10. Do not look into mirrors after midnight. Your reflection does not belong to you. Rule 11. If you hear breathing on the line, hang up. It is not a dropped call. Rule 12. Do not leave your building until you see the sun with your own eyes. Streetlights can lie. Every syllable snapped like law through the silence of my apartment, and each one stripped away another layer of comfort from things that had once felt safe. Mirrors, calls, morning light. I taped my bathroom mirror with butcher paper. I pulled the plug on my landline. I slept with curtains drawn tighter than vault doors. Still, the more precautions I took, the thinner reality felt. Like the rules weren't keeping me safe anymore. They were chiseling away at what safe meant, narrowing it, refining it until only obedience was left. And then things started changing before Siri spoke. The hallway light flickered one evening just after midnight. Not a normal flicker, but a deliberate pattern. 3 flashes, 1 pause, 3 more, as if signaling. When it steadied, I caught motion in the curve of the glass. My own reflection, standing behind me in the hall. But I was in the kitchen.
The second I shifted my head, the reflection's smile dropped into blankness and slid out of frame. I yanked the mirror off the wall and shoved it face down. 2 nights later, Siri's voice told me, "You did well." For the first time, there was inflection, faint approval, like feeding a dog a treat after it obeys. My head spun. I didn't want her to praise me. I didn't want the AI in my pocket, my apartment, my bloodstream of devices to actually interact with whatever was happening. I wanted her to be a middleman, not a partner. But now it felt different, less warning, more training. That night, at 3:07 a.m., Siri broke her own rhythm. Say nothing, do nothing, obey until sunrise. The words repeated over and over, mechanical, rhythmic, hypnotic. For minutes, hours. I couldn't sleep under it. I couldn't think. My ears rang with instructions until my mind numbed. And then my phone shut off abruptly. No glow left. No companion voice. Just me alone in silence. I stumbled to the bathroom for water. In the corner of my eye, the mirror tape had peeled, just slightly. Enough to see a glimpse. Enough to see me. Except he was still smiling, And I wasn't. I ripped it down, heart hammering, so hard it drowned my breath. Thick tape snapped into noise, and I screamed, shoving the mirror into the closet, burying it under blankets. When I returned to bed, the phone glowed faintly again, just the pulsing orb waiting. And Siri whispered, soft and low, "Good. Soon you'll be ready."
Sleep was a joke by now. My walls were grave cold, my mirrors bagged up with duct tape, my body strung tight with adrenaline that never burned out. But fear, if nothing else, sharpens obsession, and obsession hunts for answers. On the 12th night, I tried hacking my own phone. I'm not a genius coder, but I know enough to scrape logs, pull raw data, dig into the machine-level nonsense most people never see. I connected the phone to my laptop, ran command lines, traced activity from midnight to dawn. At first, the results looked like what I expected. Basic wake events, app idle. Then I drilled deeper into hidden system diagnostics where timestamps don't lie. That's when my stomach dropped. Every night at exactly 3 a.m., a process launched without name. No app title, no function tag, just a string of characters. User signal relay dot proto. Proto, prototype. Relay, transmission. And each session logged a set of outputs around the same minute. Not answers, not errors. Scripts, rules. One step further, I examined the error handler fields. Usually those are empty or benign. File not found, timeout exceeded. Instead, mine filled with words. Full sentences not meant for human eyes. Transmission incomplete, broadcast forthwith. Barrier slip recorded at 0307. Adjust host survival protocol accordingly. Host, that was me.
My hands shook. Pages of this sterile machine language, but threaded with terms that read like instructions carved into bone. Siri wasn't inventing these rules. She was reciting them. Streaming them. From where? Another query. More digging. The last field was geolocked, and when I decrypted just enough to read it, I froze. Location source, unknown. Non-terrestrial ID. Non-terrestrial, not Earth. It hit me then like black ice under tires. Those rules weren't programmed into Siri by Apple's engineers. Siri was being used, hijacked as a mouthpiece to push survival instructions from someplace else, maybe not even our dimension. The way the rules arrived, clean, sterile, every night the same trigger, it felt like ritual. And what did it mean, barrier? I thought of the voices during the blackout, the mimic knocking, the reflection outside the window that smiled when I didn't. Those weren't accidents, they were probes, breaches, and the only thing holding them back was human compliance with a set of rules transmitted through our devices. We weren't being warned for fun, we were being managed. That night, at 3 sharp, Siri woke again. But this time, instead of just dictating, she spoke with cadence closer to human speech. My mouth drying out as I listened. Host survival is part of barrier operation. Obedience maintains separation. I sat frozen, heart splintering in my ribs. This wasn't assistance. It wasn't even warning. I was a cog in someone else's maintenance plan. And disobedience, it wasn't just personal danger. Disobedience threatened the barrier, which meant if I broke too many rules, things weren't just waiting for me. They were waiting for the whole world.
The 13th night didn't begin with a single rule. It began with a flood. At exactly 3 a.m., my phone screen lit brighter than ever, so white I thought it would burn out the pixels.
The orb pulsed frantic, and the voice that came wasn't steady. It was rapid, metallic, but urgent, like whoever was pushing those rules behind the screen knew something was about to happen. Rule 13, do not speak, do not move, do not draw attention. Rule 14, do not attempt to leave until verified sunrise. Rule 15, if you see yourself outside, do not engage. Rule 16, survive until dawn or replacement occurs. Replacement. The word ripped my heart apart. Already my apartment groaned. The walls ticked like cooling engines, but no heat should have done that. I shut the curtains tighter, pulled the blanket over my head, tried to level my breath. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, pacing up my walkway. Too slow for a neighbor, too heavy to be human. My phone buzzed violent, Siri repeating over and over, do not move, do not engage, do not engage. I didn't dare breathe loudly, but then the scrape came against the glass, and I couldn't stop myself. I peeked. For maybe half a second, and what I saw collapsed my stomach. Outside my window, in the pale glow of the flickering street lamp, stood me. Not a variant, not a shadow. Me. Same shirt I'd worn yesterday, same scar by my lip, same uneven hair. Except this me didn't blink, just stood in the snow, lips curling slowly into a grin. He lifted a hand and waved. My phone nearly screamed, "Do not respond." The other me tilted his head, grinning wider, and slowly raised a finger toward the door. Instantly, the knock landed behind me, heavy, perfectly timed with his grin. Knock, knock, knock. I clapped both hands over my mouth so I wouldn't answer. My chest burned. My own face outside twisted into something feral, all teeth, while the knocking gained rhythm, mirroring a heartbeat. My heartbeat. Minutes became hours. I thought I'd lose my sanity burying myself in silence. Finally, the grin outside peeled, lips splitting into a chasm of light, slit teeth glowing red hot. And then, the second bell sounded. Not Siri, not my devices. The siren I'd only ever heard faintly outside. A deep metallic bellow washed through the town. The other me froze, smile snapping shut, body bending wrong. Then it was gone. My window reflected only empty street again. The phone dimmed, Siri's voice returning to monotone, calm, stripped to frenzy. Host, protocol complete. Temporary safety achieved. Temporary. The word cut through me like ice, worse than the presence had. Because dawn wasn't salvation. Dawn only meant their turn was over, and next time, I wasn't sure I'd pass the test.
Sunrise used to mean relief. That morning, it just meant the test was over. The curtains were soaked with frost, every pane dripping as though the air itself had tried to crawl inside. I sat on the floor with my phone clenched in both hands, eyes so bloodshot it looked like they'd been scraped raw. My recorder blinked once, then died. For a moment, I thought I'd finally won. I'd survived another night, followed the rules, ignored whatever wore my own skin outside. The sirens had blared. Dawn had come. I was still me. Then Siri spoke. Not chipper daytime voice, not sterile monotone. A hybrid. Calm, even, but unmistakably deliberate. Host survival achieved. Compliance feeds stability. A current of nausea roared through me as I stared at the pulsing orb. What happens if I stop obeying? I whispered. My throat was raw to the point of bleeding, but I forced the words out. For a long time, silence filled my apartment. I thought maybe I'd broken the script, snapped whatever bizarre loop this was. Then the orb flared white, flooding every corner of the room with harsh light. The phone speaker cracked as the voice slurred into something lower than human, more like the sound a dying machine would make if it tried to pray. Then someone else will hear their first rule at 3 a.m.
I dropped the phone.
Daniel barked a nervous laugh. Then he stopped, because the phone immediately pulsed brighter and Siri's voice pressed heavier. Do not laugh. The air thickened instantly. The apartment's lights dimmed, even though no switch had flipped. A groaning sound pressed against my walls, not outside, not inside, but through them, as if a live wire hummed inside the very frame of the building. Daniel's grin wilted under the pressure. "Holy, shut up!" I hissed, clamping a hand over his mouth. Sweat ran hot down my back. The phone pulsed again. Silence now. The walls are listening. The sound outside shifted. Footsteps, pacing along my balcony. Too heavy, too slow. Daniel's eyes blew wide above my hand. His body shook under my grip with laughter cut into terrified silence. We clung to stillness while the scrape moved away, then returned again, pausing like it settled right above us in the rafters. Minutes ticked. My lungs burned. Then it was gone. The light came back, humming gentle. My phone cheerily chimed a calendar reminder, as if the past few minutes had been everyday life. Daniel sagged into the couch, chest heaving. He didn't doubt anymore, not after hearing the rules speak his name. At dawn, he left without finishing his coffee. On the threshold, he looked me dead in the eye and said the most honest words I'd ever hear from him. "Don't invite me here again." Proof didn't forge solidarity. It isolated me further. The rules weren't just mine anymore. They could spread, latch onto whoever came too close. My phone pulsed once before shutting down for the day. Obedience has kept you alive. Remember that.